Steering wheel, somebody tell him to give it to me.
There's something loose between my legs.
I don't know. Let go!
I'm heavier than a freaking boat.
Nothing you can say can make that any better.
No more radio for the rest of the race.
I'm going home.
FC and F1 podcast by Soccer Nerds. I'm a soccer nerd. We are recording this very, very early on a Thursday morning because we are going to have a double episode. Belgian Grand Prix review, as well as a preview for the Hungarian Grand Prix. As I mentioned, I'm Donald Wine. I am a soccer nerd. I have another soccer nerd with me, Eboni. Eboni, how are we doing this morning?
It's morning, and it's the morning that I leave for All-Star, so we're gonna knock this out.
Oh yeah, we're gonna knock this out because All-Star is important. Is that today? Is that next week? I don't know what day it is.
It starts. The skills challenge is Friday, and then the actual game is Saturday.
It's Saturday, yeah. So All-Star for the WNBA. Enjoy that. That should be a lot of fun. But let's talk about the Belgian Grand Prix quickly, and then on the other side, we will talk about previewing this weekend's race for Hungary. But just the results from Belgium. Pole was Kimi. Kimi ended up placing first. Charles second. Max ending up third on the podium. Lewis was fourth. We'll talk about him in just a second. Oscar fifth. And Isack Hajar finished sixth. 3 DNFs. George Russell, Sergio Perez, and Lance Stroll. Ebony, I want to start with the opening lap because that was where the fireworks really began. George clips Lewis, is forced out of the race. He crashes. He's out of the race. But then, at least for me, wrongfully, Lewis was given a 5-second penalty for, quote, causing the crash. Your thoughts on the opening lap and what happened between George and Lewis?
Yeah, I think George said it best. It was a racing incident. So I don't know why the FIA then turned around and said, no, it wasn't. That was pretty odd. The penalty doesn't make sense. Like, even watching in real time or even the replays, you can see that all the drivers involved, there was nothing any of them could do. They were put into a bad situation because George didn't have any battery left on the first lap. He literally was a sitting duck, which means he had to do what he thought was best for his race. And he took the corner, but that didn't really leave a lot of room or time for Lewis to correct or, react appropriately. So I don't know why the FIA decided that that was a penalty. But then you go a little bit further in and you see Charles and Lando have I don't want to say similar situation, but they definitely had a coming together moment.
Yeah, they
And
had a Rubbings
yeah,
racing
that's
moment
fine.
for sure.
Yeah. And the FIA was just like, nah, that's fine, actually. And of course, there's going to be some discourse about why Lewis had a penalty, but Charles didn't. And there are some implications there about, what that looks like for both drivers and how that penalty can be perceived to fans. Just like, whether it's team rules, racial, things like that. So it ruined the race for me because once that came out, and I don't like how Ferrari handled it either. They're known for like waiting to the last minute to say something to their drivers. And this was no exception. So it didn't totally ruin his weekend, but it definitely like perturbed him enough to like, I think he just kind of like ran his race because there was nothing besides like one other battle that was really cool. Like, this race didn't give us much, honestly.
Yeah, and you know what? I think also with Lewis, like it's not like Lewis was jutting into George on that turn. He had the inside track. He had the inside line, and it was George who kind of jutted over to try and cut Lewis off, and that's what caused the crash. And like you said, it was because he had no battery, and he was like, "What else can I do to hold off Lewis, but to see if I can get him before the apex of this corner?" And everyone, the pundits, like you mentioned, George, um, Lewis got on immediately and was like, "Hey, he was in my line. I had the right of way, essentially." And everybody agreed with Lewis except for the FIA. He gets a 5 second penalty. They also tried to diss him towards the end as well because they tried to cite him for an unsafe release in the pit lane when one of the Ferrari pit crew inexplicably tried to reach back for a tire after he was given the all clear sign to leave, and he
Yeah.
kind of clipped him on the way out. Again, and they were going to check after the race, and I said in the chat like if they summon him to the principal's office, essentially, he never does that. He's like, if you're gonna give me a fine, you're gonna give me a fine, but you're not summoning me anywhere. Like this ain't a court, and I like once the race is over, I don't have to answer to you. So he didn't go, but I guess calmer heads prevailed, and he was not cited for a penalty for that, which would have taken him down to fifth place because he still had just 1.7 seconds on Oscar. But other than that, I thought Lewis ran a great race, and it's a shame that we didn't get to see him really challenge for the podium because of the fact that he was dealing with this 5 second penalty that he had in the middle of the race. I did want to also talk about there was another battle, and it didn't really end the way it didn't really end climactically, I guess, if I'm trying to form a word. But Kimi versus Charles, I thought for several laps was a really good one because it felt like
Yeah.
Charles, he had the lead, he gave it back to Kimi. Kimi, I think, pitted, and then Charles took the lead. Kimi then came back, and then it was kind of back and forth for a few laps before Kimi took the lead, and even all the way down to the end. Charles was still trying to gain on him. It wasn't like Kimi built this, 15-second lead that he's been doing in other races so far this season. It was a back and forth battle, and Charles, even on the last lap, had a chance to try and do something to get close to him. But I think the gap ended up being about 1.4 seconds or something like that, which, between first and second, that's a battle considering what we've seen so far between Kimi and the rest of the pack this season.
Yeah, that was a really good battle. There was also one further down, like with Gasly, Lawson, I think it was Lindblad and Colapinto.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
For like
one of those
ninth and 10th. Yeah.
Yeah. That was also a fun battle. Like they're kind of competing for the best of the middle of the pack. And it's been fun to watch just because I've never seen Gasly drive like this. And then obviously we weren't expecting Colapinto to do anything in that car. There was a point where he was like not even like they weren't sure if he was going to drive again. So this has been really fun just to see both teams develop on their own, like in a unique way, but they're truly we have a middle class now in a billion-dollar sport. And it's
Mm-hmm.
been fun to see like that develop just in general, not just throughout this race, but like in general of the sport.
And with the exception of Gasly, who's not old, but he's not one of the newbies. Like it's basically a lot of new guys that are forming that middle tier that you just mentioned, right? Colapinto's young, Liam Lawson's young, Lindblad's the only rookie on the grid this year,
Yeah.
and you have those kind of drivers setting us up for what could be future battles towards the top of the grid, which I think is cool to see that in year 2 and year 3 for a lot of these guys, and even in the case of Lindblad, year 1, that they're starting to kind of assert themselves and try to establish themselves as someone who's going to be on the grid for a very long time. That's something that I think we were all worried about last year when all the rookies were not doing well, save for Kimi in that Mercedes car. It seems like now that they all have kind of gotten their footing and are able to make their own name and stake their own claim in this sport, which I think is important for the future of the sport. You know, we hate to say it, but Lewis is not going to be around for 20 more years driving. He could,
We don't know that.
but we don't know that. We look at Fernando Alonso though, who is checked out of everything. I also will shout out Colapinto because the conspiracy theorists around the world will tell you that Colapinto knew that Argentina was going to throw that match in the World Cup final, so he was like, "Let me leave with something," and he got the last point. Meanwhile, both Spanish drivers, Carlos and Fernando, were like, "Nah, man, it's the World Cup final. We out." And they did not score any points in this race. The last guy I want to shout out is Isack Hadjar because he qualified. He got to P3, if memory serves, and then he changed some of his car around between qualifying and the start of the race. So he started at the back of the grid and went from
No, no,
21st.
he came into the race with
Oh yeah, he had a 30 was a 30 lap. I'm sorry, 30 place penalty or something like that. It was
yeah,
some big
he
penalty.
changed something on the car. Like you only get three, and this was his fourth one. I can't remember what it
Mhm.
was. Same thing with Lando. I thought Lando was supposed to also have.
Lando was a 10. Yeah, it was the same deal, I believe. And then I think Fernando Alonso was like, I mean, we're already in 20th. Let me just fix my car too.
Yeah,
So he was down there. But Isaac going from 21st to 6th, I thought was incredible.
insane.
Yeah, that's a. I mean, and again, we were focused on the race for the podium, for the top. You mentioned the race in the middle, but Isaac just quietly hooped. And I thought that was a really, really cool thing to see for him because, again, while all the focus was on Max, and you think even during qualifying, he was just, Red Bull was just hell bent on having Isaac set a couple of toes for Max to try and get into, first, second, or third. The fact that Isaac was able to make those changes and still also get all the way up to get sixth, I think Red Bull should be extremely happy with how he performed this over the past weekend. So shout out to him as well. Anything else from you before we get to our accountability corner?
No, it was really cool, obviously, to see. I think Isaac showed what it means to, drive a Red Bull. Because
Hmm.
you've seen that from Max before, but that second seat, you've never really seen that. Like, no, Danny, I'd give it to Danny. He's done it before, but like in this mad dash of like trying to figure out who that second seat belongs to, Yuki couldn't really do it, Liam couldn't really do it, but to see Hajar do it is really, really cool. And he's been performing with that car really well before all the changes that so I'm really happy for the kid. I hope he can continue it. And let's get the accountability corner.
Yeah, and I hope for him, I hope Red Bull is satisfied because obviously in the end, we know how fickle that company is when it comes to that second Red Bull seat. But hopefully, he has solidified his place there for the time being. As you mentioned, let's take a quick break, and we're going to come back with our accountability corner. All right, it's time for accountability corner. This is where we review our preview predictions and see how right or wrong we are. We start with the podium, our actual podium. Just if you did not listen to the first half, Kimi was first place, Charles second, and Max was third. We go to Kyle, and Kyle had predicted Kimi correctly to be first. He also predicted George to be second and Lewis to be third. So not quite there. He was almost there with Lewis. After lap one, his George prediction was wrong. Ebony, you had Kimi, you had Lewis in second, very very close there, and you had Pierre Gasly. You were on the Alpine train, and it didn't work out for you.
It didn't. I thought he was going to use, the weekend to be like, I'm avenging. 'Cause, I mean, it's a very emotional weekend for him every time.
Hmm.
So I was hoping, and also he's just been silently hooping really, really. Like his driving has been so impressive. I was like, you know what? He could do it. He could not do it
He cannot
this
do it.
this weekend. That so I'm still rooting for you, Gasly. Always gonna be an Alpine, but yeah, that was me letting the emotions get the best of me.
It happens. It happens in this sport.
Sometimes a thug breaks. It's okay.
Speaking of emotions, my emotions were that Lewis was going to win this race. He was very close. We talked about that. I also had Max second and Kimi third, so I did have 2 out of 3 on the podium in different places and just missed out on the third. I'll take that as a pretty good
That's a
weekend for
solid
me.
win.
Yeah.
That's a solid B weekend, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
B passes. B's
Yeah.
good.
C's get
Um,
degrees. So unlike that
exactly.
doctor that doesn't have hers, I don't know, man. Take our-
uh, and then and then Andre had Kimi finishing first. He had Lewis finishing second, and George finishing third. So again, the people who had George, George really let them down. Let's get to our
Should have
constructor
forgot about him.
scrap. I know. Our constructor scrap, the actual high among or among the constructors was Ferrari, with Charles finishing second and Lewis finishing fourth. The lowest, the teams that did not score any points outside of Aston Martin and Cadillac, who we cannot pick, was Williams and Haas. So let's go through our construction strat very quickly. Kyle had predicted Mercedes as the most points, and he predicted Audi with the least points. So no points for Kyle there. Ebony, you had the most being Ferrari. Good for you. You
Was that
you
right?
went on a limb and you said your lease was going to be McLaren, and we know the reasons why, but it didn't quite work out the way that we thought that it could happen, given what we had heard
Yeah,
about McLaren's struggles before the race.
fair. I'm
Yeah,
wait, was I right about Mercedes? I mean Ferrari?
you were. Yeah, Ferrari was the high. So at least you
Yes.
got Ferrari points. I had a great week because I picked Ferrari as my most points and I picked Williams as the least points. And the only reason I picked Williams was because I said Carlos is worried about the World Cup final and the World Cup final only, and he will not get any points in this race. And sure enough, Albon joined him in that quest for World Cup glory.
Solidarity.
Solidarity. So thank you, Williams. I mean, I guess not thank you. Sorry that I had to pick you, and sorry that I was correct in that regard. Andre had Mercedes as the most points, and he had Haas as the least points. So we got 1 out of 2 there. As always, after every race, we give out our Zoomy Boy and our Gloomy Boy awards. Zoomy Boy for the driver who we think, or even constructor that we think hooped the most over the weekend, and the gloomy boy is the driver or constructor that we think was the most terrible. It doesn't have to be based on how they finished. Ebony, you're zoomy boy and gloomy boy.
See, I think everybody kind of had the same idea, so I didn't want to choose that. I mean, I'm still gonna give it to Isaac for Zumi.
Mm-hmm.
Um, man, just bald. I'm so proud of what he did this weekend. So no matter if we all have the same thing, I'm still going with Isaac. My gloomy, uh, just I was gonna choose an obvious one, um, but I think Alonso. I don't know if that's still obvious or not, but Alonso. It's been bad over there, and it did not look like it was getting any better. And then you came in and you still started at the back and still finished in the back by not finishing. So it's looking bleak over at Aston Martin. I mean, didn't Stroll finish like 2 laps behind at one point? Was that
Oh
this
yeah,
race?
he was 2 laps,
Yeah. Like,
or but he didn't finish at all. It was Alonso that was 2 laps behind
there
because
we go. I knew it.
he was about to get lapped by Kimi as Kimi won the race for a
Yeah.
second time.
Yeah. So exactly. Just bad vibes over there. He's got a World Cup to go cry into now, but I guess. But man, I don't acknowledge Stroll as a driver, so there's that's why I didn't say all of Aston Martin, because at this point they have 2 open seats, and no viable solution to putting people in them. Um, so yeah,
I was gonna save the Stroll slander for the other half of the pod, but I'm glad we got into the first half as well because sometimes it's warranted. And this weekend he didn't show up. So for my Zoomy boy, I also had Isack. Like I said, from 21st to 6th. That's just hooping on another level.
yeah.
Very few guys have made that kind of leap in one race. So very, very happy to see him do that. And my gloomy is the obvious. It's George. George had an opportunity, and on the first lap, it all came crashing down. And now he's staring up even further at his teammate Kimi. And I'm sure with all the rumors swirling about the driver carousel, that's going to probably take flight in a couple of weeks, really in heart and in big way. George seems distracted by that as well. So yeah, not a great week for George in that car at Mercedes. We are now done with the Belgian Grand Prix recap part of this episode, and we are going to switch to the Hungarian Grand Prix preview after this break. All right, we are back and we turn our attention to this weekend in the Hungarian Grand Prix at the Hungaroring out there outside of Budapest. Let's talk about this ring. It is a 4.381 kilometer track. That's 2.72 miles. They'll be racing 70 laps on Sunday, and the race lap record is a minute 16.627 seconds that was set by Lewis Hamilton in 2020. The first Hungarian Grand Prix was in 1936, but it was at a different track. The Hungaroring was built in 1985 and was not, and this race came back on the calendar in 1986. It has not left the calendar since then. It will continue to be on the calendar through 2032. And an interesting note about this particular track is that Lewis Hamilton has won this race the most, 8 times. That is tied with Michael Schumacher in the French Grand Prix for the most wins anyone has at any race in F1 history. So, for all you Delulu Island fans and Lewis fans, this might be your weekend. Ebony, talk up a little bit about what happened last year in this race.
So last year was the year, let's see. Lando finished first,
Mm-hmm.
Oscar second, George third. I believe Charles had pole for this
Yes.
race, and the only driver to not finish was Ollie Behrman. I know there was a lot of back and forth within this race. There was an incident between Lewis and Max at one point that the stewards, kind of like what happened in this last race. Lewis kind of got ran off the road. He still finished the race, but the FIA decided that it was just a racing incident, so no further action needed to be taken. There was a really good battle up front with Lando and Oscar. Is it bad that I don't remember if there was any papaya rules that came into play for this one?
I don't think there was, but they happened so much last year that it kind of all blends together. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, this was I mean, obviously another 1-2 podium. This was a very good like lead up to like essentially McLaren taking the championship for constructors. They were on a tear. That car looked unstoppable. Both drivers were out of their minds for that race. And it just was decent racing. Wasn't like it was anything sparked joy. I know that was a big question we had regarding um how will like last race, how will that race um take precedent over the World Cup, like, take some of that hype. Now it's after the World Cup. You got a lot of drivers invested in that. How are you capitalizing on like their interest in the sport, and how do you pull those fans that were, like, oh well, Alonso, if you're an Alonso fan, was rooting for Spain, so I'm going to root for Spain, anything like that. There's some way to grab those soccer fans that were like 0.4% interested in the World Cup and bringing them over to this race. So this weekend will be a really interesting one. But yeah, last year Papaya dominated, and just like they were doing all season. So nothing crazy.
I think, again, FIA take advantage of the World Cup withdrawal that we all suffer through this
Yeah.
first week. So hopefully this race is a good one. But unfortunately, as we talk about the track, FIA probably is sitting there thinking that they were wishing that this was a different race, because the Hungaroring is not known for overtaking. It's viewed as a processional race because there's just very few opportunities to pass. There are 4 straight mode zones on this track, but there aren't many straights. In fact, there's really only one, and that is where the start finish line is. So a lot of the drivers call it more of a karting circuit because it's twisty, it's narrow. They don't use it that often. And so because of that, the racing lines are very tight, and there's not a lot of chance on these turns, especially some of these hairpin turns, to to really do anything. It's set up more like Monaco. In Monaco, they've tried to
Ugh,
tinker with it so many times to try and make it interesting, and most times it isn't because nobody's really able to pass, save for pit strategy or some sort of error. I will note that turns 1 and 12 have been resurfaced. Does that change anything? Probably not. But I
nah.
think what's going to be important and I think one might be because one of the hairpin turns, and so that's where you maybe have a chance after you get through that speed trap to try and overtake somebody. And it'll be interesting that first turn off of the start, because that's where people will be jockeying for position the most, and whoever can survive that hairpin turn into that kind of that curving straight that goes to turn two, that will maybe be where we start to see some separation from some folks as the race goes on. So, your thoughts on this track in particular, the fact that there really isn't a lot of chances here for people to overtake.
I mean, like you said, it's going to be a game of strategy, getting off the line successfully and quickly, cleanly, which does help Red Bull a lot because they've been able to do that really well. Um, I don't know how much this race lends itself to Kimi, just because there's not a lot of room to drive the way he drives, which is Kimi go fast, and this is not the track for that. So I feel like this could be a really good weekend for like a couple of constructors that have that like good tidy type of release out of corners. It's not just going to be the drivers and trying to manage batteries. It's really going to be about like placing your car in the right spot. Because like you said, this is like a very progressional type of track, and every little piece matters of just like where you are within like a turn. And obviously that comes with driver experience, but some of these cars are better at it than others, like just to be completely frank. So it should be a very interesting weekend. I have some theories about who I think benefits the most out of it. So we'll see.
We will save those for later on when we start our predictions. Quickly with tire talk, they are bringing the softest three tires in the range. C3 tire is the hard, C4 is the medium, and C5 is the soft. One thing about this track is because of all these twists and turns. First of all, track temps are usually among the highest of the season in Hungary, mainly because of the fact it's normally in late July. It's not supposed to be super hot there this weekend, but the track temps themselves usually get pretty hot because of all cars in one particular spot on the track. Because of also how the track is laid out, there's usually a lot of thermal degradation and also graining expected from these tires. So the difference between a one-stop strategy and a two-stop strategy, that may dictate who wins this race and who can execute that the best. Before we get to a break, I because we are doubling up this episode, I do want to go straight to our what to watch, and I'll start first off by listing a couple from people who aren't here. Kyle mentioned, he said, "quote I need George to go full FU mode to Mercedes for entertainment." Put a pin in that because I think
Mhm.
that's important. Deep D says, "Aston Martin, what can you show me? Their first massive upgrade is coming," and I will note that Lance Stroll, with this race, will start his 200th F1 race.
Well,
How
I see
do we let
that's
that happen?
201 too many.
How did we get to 200 starts for Lance Stroll? Daddy Stroll needs to tell me that. That because that's on him. Ebony, you're what to watch for this weekend.
Um, it's a weekend of bounce backs for a lot of for a lot of drivers. Lewis, I think this is also a good bounce back for the McLaren boys. Um, it wasn't like a bad weekend for them last weekend, but still, they haven't had a good year. So, Lando bought upgrades from last week. So let's see if they are actually sustainable. Lewis race was kind of ruined. Can he bounce back from that and take it to Kimi? George, buddy, is this your? I
Hmm.
hope this is your audition for a new team going forward. Because I don't think you're driving in a Mercedes in 2027.
And it's the last one, right? It feels like it's one of the last. We got what, two more races, Hungary, and I'm blanking on the next race before we have the full summer break. And I think with him, yeah, this is kind of an audition, but I also don't know that he wants to audition on this type of track because the Mercedes car obviously is not. It's sometimes good in the corners, but it feels like Ferrari and even it's sometimes Red Bull has been better on those corners. But I also think that he may not have the same battery issues that they have had in previous races when there are long straights because of the fact that there is more chance to kind of recharge those batteries with so many turns and not a lot of straights to use them in, so they can go full power on those straights because they're short and there's not that many of them. But for me, I think the big thing to watch, and we kind of alluded to it, is will we have a boring race or will drivers find ways to overtake? Because there's not a lot of opportunities here. Sure, you have maybe turn one, you maybe have the straight where the start finish line is, and then there's another straight over between turns 3 and 4. And I guess 11 and 12, but 11 it doesn't feel like that's long enough to really do anything. It's really a straight between turn 14, crossing the finish line, and going all the way down to the hairpin at turn one. That's really the biggest chance teams have to really overtake anybody. I'm wondering if we're going to see that or if it's going to be like Monaco, where it's really down to qualifying and pit strategy. And if that's the case, then this is not the race that FIA probably wants to welcome people back after 6 weeks of soccer, where they're paying half attention to this. And also, again, right before the summer break, you want this to have some sort of fireworks, unless there's a big massive try to reallocation of order in that first lap. It doesn't feel like this is one where people can settle in and expect a lot of hooping and a lot of back and forth between drivers because there just isn't a lot of room.
Yeah. Which is fair. Um, I do also worry that they're going to, because right now there's nothing else happening in the world. Soccer just ended, and unless you're a true USL League One sicko or MLS sicko, there's no European soccer. Um, and I think like Australian, the A League is maybe back. Don't know.
Well, I mean, League MX is about to come back too, right?
Yeah,
Because they're going to have Leagues Cup very, very shortly, and I think they're starting the league off just to get a couple matches out of the way before that happens. So, yeah, there's an opportunity here for FIA to kind of capture some people's attention, and they are hoping that this race is one that's worthy of said attention. So, yeah. Let's take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to talk about our podium predictions and then wrap this thing up as we get ready for Hungary. All right, we're back. We are now to our podium predictions and our constructor scrap. Let's start with our podium predictions. I'll start with Kyle, who predicts that the order of the podium will be George, Max, and Kimi. So he's thinking when he asked George to go full FU mode that he actually does it, which is a bold strategy. Cotton, hopefully it pays off for George. Deep D has Kimi going first, Charles second, and Lewis third. So she is on full Delulu Island mode, and I am here for it. Ebony, your prediction.
I didn't realize that I had the same podium as Deep D.
Oh, you do. So
I
you have
do.
Kimi, Charles, and Lewis.
Charles Lewis, yeah. When you
So
read, I was like, "Oh snap!"
I have a different order, but the same three guys. I'm still stuck on Lewis getting the ninth. I think part of me thinks that there's obviously he has a good enough car, and I think Ferrari has a good enough car for him to challenge for this. But also the fact that he's won this race 8 times before. He hasn't done it since 2020 when he set the lap record. And the fact that he can make some history, knowing that this is an opportunity for him to do that, past Michael Schumacher to have the most wins by any driver at any track. I think he does it. So I have Lewis going first. I have Kimi coming in second, and I have Charles coming in third. So hopefully Delulu Island is in full effect on this weekend. Let's go to constructor scrap. Again, we're not allowed to use Cadillac or Aston Martin for least because Mercedes didn't get a 1-2, so we haven't banned them yet from most, so they are in play for this week. Kyle has taken full advantage of that, as you note from his podium prediction. His most is Williams. I'm sorry, his most is Mercedes, and his least is Williams. Deep D has most being Ferrari, of course, because she has Delu Island on her podium, and she has least as Audi. We're gonna have to talk to Deep D about that. Ebony, your most and your least points in your constructor scrap.
Most Ferrari, if you got a double podium, you kind of got to have them at your most. Least, pick any of the Williams, Haas, Eric, like contingent, and yes, there you go. If I had to put one, I'll put Williams, I guess. But
Okay.
any of those three, whichever, throw a dart.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I have Ferrari as my most, obviously, because I have Lewis and Charles in my podium, and I have Haas as my least. I went with Williams last week. I think Haas, again, short of Ali, Esteban has just not been there this season, and they're really relying on Ali to do much, and Ali hasn't done as much as he was doing last year. I think this is another rough weekend for Haas, so I have them as my least. So let's wrap up here because we gotta get out of here and let's talk about the race schedule for this weekend. If you remember last week's schedule, it's the exact same. If you don't remember last week's schedule, I'm going to tell you in a second. All times are Eastern time, and everything will be on Apple TV and F1 TV. Free practice 1 will be on Friday at 7:30 a.m. Free
Oof.
practice 2 will then be Friday at 11 a.m. We go to free practice 3. That's on Saturday morning on the East Coast at 6:30 in the morning, with qualifying happening on Saturday at 10 a.m. And your Hungarian Grand Prix is at 9 a.m. on Sunday. Again, everything on Apple TV and F1 TV. Ebony, we have stuff to do. We have merch to sell. Tell us about the merch real quick before we get out of here.
We have a shout out to Stimulus for working with us and getting this all the way out. Two jerseys, home and away, affordable merch, accessible merch. That's what the name of the game is. We want people to be able to rep their teams in a fun way, but without having to spend $120 on a t-shirt.
Absolutely. And thank you for getting everything together for us, because I think it looks fantastic. One of the things I have to do this week now that the World Cup is over is figure out all this other stuff I'm going to buy with my hard-earned money, and that is among the first things that I need to figure out. So let me go ahead and do that. Let's get you to work. Let's get up out of here. This has been DRS FC. For Ebony, I am Donald. Have fun this weekend, and vroom vroom.
Vroom, vroom.